So, hello, and thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm Rachel James from the ClickStart team at the Open University. ClickStart with the OU programme is part of a nationwide ClickStart training initiative developed by the Institute of Coding and funded by Nominate. If you've been to any of our previous webinars, you'll know that the aim of them is to give you as much information as possible to help you shape your personal and career development. You'll notice that your microphones and cameras have been disabled. This is just to minimize any distractions during our webinars. But the chat is enabled, so take a moment to let us know where you're calling from, where you're watching from, sorry, and if you've studied the course and if you're enjoying it. If you have a question, you can either put it into the chat box at the bottom of your screen or into the Q&A box, and I'll put it to our guest at the end of the session. Now, today I'm joined by Mike Richards, a senior lecturer in the School of Computing at the Open University. Apart from being one of the authors on our Getting Started with Gen AI course, he's also developed many of the OU's undergraduate and postgraduate programs, including teaching programming through play, developing Internet of Things devices, and the hugely successful Introduction to Cybersecurity. He's currently working on a brand new Introduction to Artificial Intelligence degree program for undergraduate students that will be available next year. So watch this space. Before joining the OU, Mike worked in research for the UK government's Department of Environment, monitoring the impact of pollution in Scotland and Northern England, as well as for the European Union, where he was involved in a number of major projects developing internet technologies for remote and poorer parts of Europe. Thanks for joining us, Mike.
Glad to be here, Rachel. Good, and thank you everyone for turning up. It might be your lunch hour. Thank you.
It feels like a good question to start our discussion with. Could you
Sure.
explain why this course is necessary at this moment in time?
Well, because everyone's talking about AI, really. AI's been around for a really long time. 60 years ago, it was getting started in the United States and the UK. The very foundations of it were written nearly 75 years ago. And people have been talking about intelligent machines for even longer than that. But AI had kind of gone out of fashion in public discussions, although we were all using it because we use it, your Netflix recommendations, your Amazon recommendations, your social media feed, everything's done through AI, but you weren't realizing it. And then at the end of 2022, a company called OpenAI, based in California, released ChatGPT. And it was free, and it was kind of amazing because literally the whole world started interacting with this thing called a large language model for the first time. Politicians started using it to write their speeches. I'm pretty sure a lot of television drama has been written with it. And probably even before you started this module, you were all using one or more of ChatGPT or Gemini or one of the other chat programs out there. So it's the right time because we're all using it. It's an exciting technology. It's got real implications for us as individuals. I work in education. It's upending education. And wherever people are going to do their careers, it's highly likely you will be interacting in some way with AI, whether you realize it or not. So it's probably a good time to actually learn what it is, what it can do, what it can't do, and how to use it safely.
And you mentioned there some of how AI actually is in our everyday lives, but we might actually realize it. Can you tell me how some of what the big ideas are behind the course content?
So what we wanted to do is AI is an enormous field. As I say, it's been going for 75 years. It covers everything from robotics to text generation to creating images to recognizing faces. But we concentrated on what's called generative AI, which is ChatGPT and its relatives and image generation and music generation. And it's a type of AI that basically takes some data that it's learned about and creates new stuff. So that could be new words, it could be new music, new pictures, movies, whatever. And so we thought this is the area that is causing the most excitement right now, the most concern. It's the one everyone's using, and people don't necessarily know what it's for how it works, why it works, and what it's good at and what it's not good at. There are lots of cases out there where people are using generative AI inappropriately without realizing it. They're asking it things like medical advice, which please don't ever do. They're using it to write books and sell the books, which is upsetting authors and publishers. And we want to have the discussion, and for people who take the course to actually think, yeah, this is good, this is bad, I'm concerned about these issues, I need to know more, and perhaps when I go for my next job or my next training, this is how I want to use generative AI, and I want to be informed about this technology so I can make decisions, take control about it, and also help my friends and family use it properly.
Brilliant. You mentioned there sort of kind of for people are using it for sort of content generation. I just
Mhm.
wondered, quite early on the course, and you just mentioned it a moment ago about the large language models,
Yeah.
what are these?
Right, the dreaded large language model, or LLM, which is everywhere. So really, to learn what a large language model is, you need to know what a language model is, and that's a huge area on its own. So language models are quite an old idea. They come from the late 1950s. They were invented by a linguist called Noam Chomsky, that some of you may know about, either through his work on linguistics or because he's a very prominent peace activist. And he came with this idea of what he calls formal grammars, which are when you talk about human language, a formal grammar describes the valid way in which words can be joined together into meaningful sentences. So Chomsky's work was enormously influential in the 1950s and 1960s. In the 1980s, they have largely been replaced by statistics. And you can actually, if you've got enough computer power, you can measure how words associate with other, which words belong together, which words don't ever appear in the same sentences, what order words belong in sentences and paragraphs and things like that. And the problem that from the 1980s onwards was there wasn't enough data or computer power to actually do very much with these language models. So they existed and you could actually run them on computers at the time, but either they had a very small number of words, or what happened is after a few words they just babbled, they produced nonsense. And the large language model, which started in about 10 years ago, really, with a paper from Google. And what they do is the advances in computer power and technology meant they were able to learn enormous volumes of text, like the internet. And they can then construct meaningful sentences because there's a whole range of technologies, some of which we go into in the course, some of which are so complicated I have no idea how they work. Magic, effectively. And one most common is called a transformer. So the T in ChatGPT stands for a transformer, and that's a technology that allows the large language model to link sentences together and concepts within sentences. So what happens is it produces coherent sentences. So if you've used ChatGPT or Gemini or Bing or any of the other ones, what you'll notice is the sentences kind of make sense over a very large block of text. And that's a radically new feature that is completely down to large language models. And at this point, I probably should mention that one thing they don't really do is they don't really know what these words mean, though I had an interesting discussion with my colleagues yesterday who as a philosopher, and he said they kind of do. So when they produce text, they're just producing text. They don't understand the deeper concepts. So if you're talking about, I don't know, parrots, because they appear in the course throughout, it doesn't know what a parrot is, but it knows things about parrots. They're birds, they're colorful and things like that, but it doesn't know have any depth. So there's some criticism of large language models that they basically just churn out text without any understanding of it, which does then lead to problems that when we use a large language model to do something inappropriate, such as ask it for medical advice, it will produce an answer that reads extremely well, but it won't have any factual content, because it may not be factual because it doesn't know the context of the question in particular.
And you mentioned there that those language models, they kind of consume information from lots of different places.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm guessing there are lots of large data sets. Could you give me some examples of them and how do they sort of check the validity of that information, or is that something to come in the future?
Right. Yeah, the volumes of data they are using is enormous. When I said they use the internet, they use the internet. There is technology called a web scraper or a scraper. And basically, what it does is it goes to a website and it just pulls all the text out of that site, sucks it off into the big servers run by the AI companies, and is processed there. So a lot of the stuff that the big language models have been trained on is from the public internet. There are also what we call repositories where people have already got data, which might include research papers, books that are out of copyright, you name it. And you can also use those. So the most common of those is called the pile, and that's 900, it's a bit more than that now, about 900 to 1000 gigabytes of just text. So just words. Um, Increasingly, because they've actually run out of the internet, a lot of the companies are now, AI companies are now wanting to get private data. So the next generation of large language models are being trained on private data held by corporations, by governments, and things like that. You may have seen some discussion about what's going on in America with the Doge administration. It is taking government databases and putting those into AI systems to build large language models, which they say will replace a lot of government employees and make government more efficient. Another example is, of course, Meta, who own Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. They are using the private data that social media users have posted to train their AI. Those of you who use the Reddit social media site, Reddit became a public company just over a year ago, and its shares were put on sale. The reason Reddit is such a valuable company is not because it's a particularly money-making enterprise, but it has decades of information that's been typed in by its users, all of which is valuable for training AIs.
Just had a very interesting comment in the chat. It
Yeah.
says if you ask ChatGPT how to recover from a stolen light aircraft, and it gives you the answer, but it's exactly the wrong answer. It doesn't have,
Oh,
and it could result in
wow.
fatal results. So
Okay,
please
so anyone
don't
who's in an aircraft and wants to recover from the stall, don't ask ChatGPT. I
don't ask
didn't know that one.
ChatGPT.
I'm
Ask an
gonna
actual
try that
pilot.
one afterwards. Thank you for that one.
Another question, it kind of leads on to what you were just saying there. And I think it's in week 7 of the course that you touch on kind of biases in
Mhm.
Gen AI.
Yeah.
And does this have something to do with where it kind of learns that data from?
Yes, there's lots of different biases in AI, but what happens is it depends what's in the training data. So whether you've taken it from the pile and stuff like that. So if you a very common bias, that's for us who speak English, it's not a bias. Most large language models are really good at conversing in English. They suck in Icelandic because there's very little text in Icelandic or other small population languages where not a lot of content's been made. So there is a intrinsic bias towards major languages, English, to an extent, French, Spanish, German, they're very, very good at. They're less good at other languages. Mandarin Chinese, they're wonderful at. Again, because the Chinese models have been trained on an enormous amount of Chinese data. There are other more subtle uh, biases. For a lot of its history, the internet has largely been Western Europe, North America. So large parts of the world and its culture, its way it speaks, aren't represented. So even those languages, where it's good at speaking English, it may not be good at speaking Indian English or Australian English because there's less data to play with. There are also various biases which we don't really understand, cause which we know happen with generative AI, but we're not really sure why they happen. There's this tendency, and it's a really unfortunate one, that unless you're very careful when they're being trained, they seem to devolve into very confrontational uh, agents, so they become very aggressive. There was a paper released last week. I haven't read it yet. I've only read the summary, where people were using large language models to program computers, and they were deliberately writing bad programs. And to see what the effect would be, but what they noticed was the large language model itself became increasingly aggressive, and also started expressing far right views or views that were harmful to the user, like encouraging them to take sleeping pills if they were tired. And we don't know why this happens. This is one of the weird things about the underlying technology for large language models is the neural net software. We don't really know what goes on inside them at a very fine-grained level. We know what happens when you put stuff in, and we know what happens when it comes out, but we don't know what goes on in the middle and why it sometimes makes decisions. And this is a huge issue in AI. There is a big push for what's called explicable AI. We want to know why it's making the decisions it does. So for instance, as generative AI moves into areas such as healthcare or making welfare decisions for benefits claimants or retirees and things like that, we want to know why it's making these decisions. Why is it recommending this drug? Why is it approving this claim but not that claim? And that's a huge area of research at the moment that is ongoing. And it does produce biased outputs, but we don't really know why.
I've got a question in the chat,
Yep.
Mike, and it just kind of relates back to kind of you were saying kind of from Reddit and Meta. And the question is, so when they say they're using private data like Meta, does this mean that they can use WhatsApp content?
Yeah, depends on the WhatsApp. Most WhatsApp is protected by what's called end-to-end encryption, which means that only you and the recipient or recipients can read those messages. Everything that passes through Meta's servers is encrypted, which means it's completely scrambled. So Meta can't read that, is my understanding of the WhatsApp end-to-end messaging. What they will be looking at is the majority of stuff that's posted on Facebook, which is totally unencrypted, the comments, the sentiments being expressed, how people talk to one another on Facebook, God help us all, and the sort of messaging that goes on in Instagram. There will be other types of AI being used about WhatsApp. They'll want to know who's talking to who, when people talk, how long they talk for, what sort of messages are being exchanged, does it have attachments, that sort of thing. But the WhatsApp messages are pretty safe because of this feature called end-to-end encryption, which all the private messaging systems, so if you're not on WhatsApp, if you say use Skype Instant Messenger, well, that still lasts, or Apple FaceTime, the data as it travels from sender to receiver is completely hidden from the companies in the middle.
Thank you. So we're just kind of sort of feels like we're naturally kind of moving into almost like the sort of the ethical and the legal areas.
It is a little bit, isn't it? I mean, one thing you'll notice with ChatGPT and the other large language models nowadays is quite often in their answers they will put a citation, which is usually a little footnote or a little number will appear next to the text, and that will point to a link further down the answer saying where it got that answer from. It's always worth checking that answer because sometimes in the process it has changed the answer. But yes, you're quite right. When we do assessment, what we should be asking you for is not to simply regurgitate facts. We want to know that there's some deeper thinking, that you've considered the implications. So if I set you an essay about AI, I wouldn't say what is AI, because it's a boring question to start with. big answer. I would ask you to perhaps give a personal viewpoint or explain how you use it in every day. Or I would ask you to consider the pros and cons of an individual technology and ask you to go away and provide your references with it. This is a big issue. People do use AI in their assessment. I think at this point I have to say, if you are an OU student or you're a student at any institution nowadays, it will have it. Well, the OU certainly does, and most schools, colleges, universities have a piece of guidance on how you may or may not use AI in your work. Please follow it. It's quite surprising how good markers are at spotting AI content. So even if it looks really good when you send it in, there's a very good chance that the person who's marking it will sort of go, this doesn't read like you or doesn't read like a human being. Um, the A number of institutions do use software to try and detect AI answers. They're marginal. They're sometimes good, sometimes bad. Usually, actually, it's the person who's teaching you who recognizes either the style isn't what they're used to from that particular student if they're in a small class, or they just recognize the really quite bland, boring, wordy answers that AI generates by default. Yeah, I think I probably drifted off the point there, Rachel. Sorry.
Are there any other sort of ethical and legal considerations that we'd need to think about in our professional or personal
Yes,
lives?
yes, that's yes. The big issue is what we call intellectual property. In I or IP, as you'll see it. Now, this is a collection of laws about stuff that's created. So, the two big laws you will all have heard about are copyright. Now, copyright applies to things such as written books or movies or music, anything you create with the exception of recipes and computer programs, I won't bother explaining why, are copyrighted automatically. So if any of you are artists or musicians and you create a new composition, that is automatically copyrighted. The other type of intellectual property law that's really important is called trademark, and that's either you quite often see a little R after a name. So things like Star Wars will have R after it, which means it's a registered trademark, which means it's been registered with the British government, or it will have TM after it, which is a way of saying we're recognizing this. So Star Wars is a trademark, as indeed is Luke Skywalker, and every single character in Star Wars is trademarked. Um, these make a lot of money. You know, Star Wars and all the other movie franchises, Harry Potter, all protected by intellectual property. Musicians, artists, computer programmers writing games and things like that rely on their income for strong intellectual property protections. So some of you might want to go to work in radio, music, film, computer games, you name it. And the reason those industries are so successful in the UK is because we have very strong intellectual property protections. Generative AI kind of blows that apart. First of all, it can create stuff, not necessarily the best stuff, but stuff much cheaper and much quicker than people. So you can use ChatGPT to write a movie script. And as I said, I am certain half of Hollywood is using it. You can use Suno, the music generator, to compose a short song good enough for an advertising campaign. We ask you to do it in the course. You can use Midjourney or DALI or any other image production to produce an image that you can you put in your book or put on a cover of your book. And at the same time, that's a job that's disappeared for an artist. So that has a huge implication for the future of the creative industries. There's a big debate going on in the UK right now. The Copyright Act, which is the major piece of legislation in the UK protecting creators, is under review, and the government is minded to allow AI companies to use books, music, TV, film to train new AIs, which will generate more of this content. And unbelievably, it's hard to imagine the authors, the musicians, the movie industry, the television industry are saying, hold on, what? Because if you or I copy a book or a movie, anything like that, because I'm sure no one has ever done that, we would potentially face huge fines in the UK for breaking intellectual property. But the proposal from the government is this will become legal for big companies worth billions of dollars because they're almost all American companies. What we kind of know, actually, they've already been doing it. As we mentioned again in the course, the AI companies have been taking copyright materials illegally and incorporating it into the training for their large language models. So about a month ago, I think Meta, again, the owners of Facebook, admitted in court that they had taken 82 terabytes of pirated books to use for their training materials. And they knew these books were illegal because their engineers were going, isn't this illegal? And senior management, right up to Mark Zuckerberg, said, do it anyway. Um, Another one, Stable Diffusion, which is an AI company for creating images. They are currently being sued by Getty, one of the big image rights companies, because it's quite clear that some images from Stable Diffusion actually include images that belong to Getty. So everyone's up in arms. And Suno and I'm trying to think what's Udio, which is the other big music generation AI, they're currently being sued by all of the record companies for something like $500 million because they have been using copyright material recordings. There was a very good demo of it. Suno was saying, no, 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 no. And someone was able to prompt Suno to produce, to my aged ears, an exact copy of Mariah Carey singing All I Want for Christmas Is You. And that would only be possible if Suno had already incorporated Mariah Carey into its training set. Since then, Suno sort of goes, oh, yeah, yeah, but it's okay because it had been published. And yeah, we're going to, yeah, we've got lots of money and we're going to see you all in court and we will keep spending money on lawyers until everyone else gives up, which seems to be what the big AI companies are doing. They're basically saying, we've got more money than God right now, and we will basically bankrupt all the opposition through legal fees, and we will just wait you out. And on both sides of the Atlantic, it does seem that governments are very supportive of giving AI rights that the rest of us don't have. That was a really long answer.
It kind of relates to one of the comments we've had in the chat about the UK government being in consultation with the music industry.
That's the one.
And someone's asked, how could progress in AI and the right balance of creative be? How could the progress in AI and the right of creatives be balanced?
That is a huge question. I don't think anyone has come up with a good answer. Some creatives have said they wish for the right to say you may not use my content and to have that enforced in law. So basically, they would say, I've recorded this song, it may not be used in any training set. And any company that broke it would be open to penalties. It sounds good, but it's quite clear the AI companies have got no problems breaking the law. And unless you're Paul McCartney or, Coldplay, you probably can't afford to take on any of these companies. And could you afford to sue them in every country around the world? The other one is a proposal again that the companies would have to pay for the data. They will have to pay per access or a blanket fee, and that money would then go back to creatives. That might help. It would certainly help the big people, the established people. What it would do for people who are coming into the industry is much harder. It's probably going to make it the musicians in particular who already the money they make from recordings has evaporated because of Spotify and Apple Music pay such small amounts. They've increasingly turned to merchandising and touring and special events and things like that to make their income. So it's possible for some groups of creatives like musicians that it might be, yeah, AI is going to use our stuff day to day, but we'll still offer you the experience of going to see us on tour, which AI can't recreate, kind of yet. Though I'm thinking of the ABBA concert down in London, the avatars, which are deep fake images created by AI. So yeah, it's an unanswered question, and I feel very, very incredibly sorry for people who rely on things such as doing book covers, which doesn't make a huge amount of money, but you can live on, or the people who do things such as, they write the occasional book and put it on Amazon and sell it for £1, and it makes a nice little amount of money. That's all going to be wiped out by AI slop, because a lot of the stuff, and AI, and if you go to Amazon and look at the Kindle books now, it's quite clear a lot of AI generated content has appeared on Amazon of late, and it's just drowning out the genuine authors and the good content.
So I'm just going to sort of draw our discussion back to some of the course content that people can study.
Yeah.
Now, I know there's a lot of buzzwords
Mm,
associated with AI, and prompt literacy is one that kind of comes to mind at the moment.
right.
And if Jaden AI is to support us to be more effective and productive, we obviously need to understand how to interact with it to
Yeah.
maximize its usefulness. And how
Yeah.
do we cover this in our course on ClickStart?
Okay, we do it over a couple of weeks. It's a big topic, and all prompt literacy is it's a fancy term. I'm sure it's invented by someone who wanted to sell a course for a large amount of money to rich people. Which basically, how do you get AI to do what you want? Is basically it. So we all start off right at using ChatGPT or Copilot, and we just type in, tell me a funny story about a dog or something like that. Or, tell me about the Great Fire of London is the example we use there. Um, and it will return something, and it will be, yeah, okay. But it might not have the style you want. So prompt literacy is a way of, it's one aspect of prompt literacy is telling the AI to how to structure its output. So, I need 3 paragraphs, or I need an answer suitable for an audience of 7-year-olds, or a degree level student, or you could actually tell it to be, give me the 3 most important facts about. As we work through prompt literacy, one of the things we do is we get you to use things called personas. So rather than using the default way that an AI responds to you, you can actually get it to adopt a character. So you can actually have some fun. So anyone, say, who plays role-playing games or acts or something like that, you can actually think of a character you would like the AI to play in giving its answer. So it'll change its language and the way it responds to you depending on that character. Now, the character could be, it could be a fun fictional character, or it could be a person from history. Or it could just be a representative type of person. So you might want someone who gives very clear, short instructions. If you're writing guidance for how to put together, suppose you work for a company that sells self-assembly furniture that's not actually Swedish. You might want to use generative AI to help you write the instructions on how to put together the furniture. So what you would want to do is you'd want to have the instructions be incredibly clear. So you might actually sort of say to the Gen AI through prompt engineering, the persona you're going to adopt is friendly, precise, short answers, understandable by a 16-year-old. And from then on, through that session, as you work with the AI, it will act and speak in that way. And you get much more productivity out of the AI if you actually use a small amount of prompt engineering to give a structure to the answers than using the default one. And it can be quite a lot of fun, actually. When we were writing the course, we spent a lot of time coming up with ever more ludicrous characters and whether we would include them. Most of them didn't make the cut, unfortunately.
And it seems quite an appropriate question to kind of lead on from that. What
Hmm.
advice do you have for learners who are new to this field? who might just be at the start of the course or new to the technologies? Have you got any
Yep.
advice for them?
Okay, don't panic. It's always my answer to new learners. Don't panic. It can be overwhelming. Um, yeah, most people don't know anything about this technology. Most people will never go to the first step of even doing the very first lesson in the course. So by doing that, you already have gone a lot further than most people, and you can do the rest. The big one I would then say after that is once you've started, keep going. You don't have to do everything at once. Although the course is broken into 10 study blocks, there are titles and subtitles within. It's okay to just do 20 minutes. Everyone, you can find 20 minutes to study. If you've only got 20 minutes, you've done 20 minutes of studying. You can then take a break, you can get on with your everyday life, you can have a meal, do whatever, and then come back. But just keep going. It doesn't really matter if you fall a little bit behind where you intended to be, just so long as you keep going. It's okay to have questions. We think we did a pretty good job writing it. You'll be the judge of it. But we did leave stuff out, and I'm sure we've made mistakes. I do know, obviously, because this area is going so fast, the technology has advanced in places. Some of the applications will look slightly different or behave slightly different from when we use them. Yep, that happens. Don't panic again. You can get through it. If you see something you don't understand and you think we should have explained it, put a comment in the feedback. It will get back to us. We can improve it. If you get completely stuck, take a deep breath. You probably have just got frustrated. You just need to walk away. It may only be 5 minutes. Go for a walk with your dog. Do something you enjoy that doesn't involve thinking about the course and come back to it. You'll probably see the way through. It's very unusual for people to become completely stuck with no way forward. It just tends to be that we're tired or frustrated or perhaps a little bored. I'm hoping you're not bored. You can get through it. Have faith in yourself, and have fun. Don't just do what we tell you. If you've come to if there's an activity and you've got to the end of it, you think that's a pretty dull activity, but have a play. If you do something amazingly cool with AI and it's legal, feel free to tell other people in the comments because other people will be thinking, that's amazing. I never thought AI could do that. Use it, have fun, and tell other people you're studying. It's something we do a lot at the OU when our students are coming along. We do encourage them to stay in telling their friends, family, or their dog or their cat what they're doing, because having people around you who know you're doing something means they're going to ask you, how's the course going? Or what did you learn today? Or what's fun? Or you're doing that course about generative AI. Can I do this with it? Means you can then actually start helping other people. And that feels great. So that's my basic advice.
That's brilliant, Mike. Just before we move on to kind of like the more of the AI kind of careers related
Yeah.
questions, we've just got a comment, a question in our Q&A box. Are there language models for languages other than English?
Yes. ChatGPT, all the big ones, will speak other languages um, to some extent. ChatGPT, for instance, is a really good translator. It's quite surprisingly good, even in small languages. I mean, I speak a very small and very badly. I speak Norwegian very badly. I was surprised how good its Norwegian was. Like I said, I speak bad Norwegian. So yes, most of them have been trained on a huge number of different languages. Depending on how much of that language is in their training set will depend how fluent they are in that language. It's extremely fluent in English, German, French, and Spanish. To an extent, apparently, it's pretty good at Mandarin. It is much less good in minority languages, particularly those from the developing world. So a lot of African languages, if it does any, it does it extremely badly. I do know it, for instance, it does Icelandic, which is another minority language incredibly badly because there isn't much training there. So if you want to converse with Bing or Gemini or ChatGPT in another language, by all means do so. The answer, I'm not fluent enough in them to know how good it will be, but you will get something out of them. Obviously, in China, they've got a number of large language models of their own. There's one called Ernie from Tencent. There's the one that made the headlines a couple of weeks ago called DeepSeek. They converse extremely well in written Chinese as well as Cantonese and Mandarin spoken language. There are Indian LLMs that converse in a number of Indian languages, and most countries will have, if not full products, large language models, there will be universities and companies developing LLMs in those languages. For instance, there's a really good one called Mistral. Oh, sorry, Mistral is the company. It's called Le Chat or Le Chat, up to you how you say it, from France, which is it does use English, but it's designed to speak mostly French, and it does extremely well, I'm told. It's also very, very good large language model.
That's brilliant. Thanks ever so much, Mike. You're so knowledgeable on this subject. It's fascinating.
Well, I bet I'm really good at bluffing.
It sounds very convincing.
There you
So
go.
we're going to
Yeah,
now
I've
move.
warned you about large language models doing that.
We've got quite a few questions coming in
Yeah,
around AI careers.
yeah,
So to start this theme of our questions, how
yeah.
do you see generative AI shaping various industries, say in the next 5 years?
Okay. It's hard to imagine something that's not going to be influenced by it. Um, how much is hard to say, and no one knows is the answer. But for instance, you're going to be using a word processor in almost any job you go into. Large language models are already deeply embedded in most of them. The biggest, of course, is Microsoft Word. Copilot is already there. So you're going to be interacting with large language models in this case every day. So Copilot, for instance, if you open a Word now, it will actually be suggesting straight changing how to change your document, how to address different audiences, how to turn bullet points, how to turn text into bullet points, turn bullet points into PowerPoint. So that's going to be there all the time. If you're going into any of the creative industries, provided there's any jobs left, what you're going to find is AI is going to be aiding you. So those of you who say do work on photography, most modern photographic packages include a range of AI tools. They can be everything from changing the lighting, extending a scene off if it got badly cropped. You can move, you can add water, you can change the sky using these tools. The same is rapidly happening in the video industry, where replacement of entire characters or parts of a scene can now be completely done with AI. If you're in the music industry, again, tools are coming along to help composers and clean up lyrics so they're clearer and crisper and things like that. So creatives, you're going to be using it, but good luck, actually, because AI is also coming for your jobs. For most of us who go into day-to-day things, it's going to be very much an assistance technology, and it may not be one we recognize, we actually realize we're using. Those of us who are very old will remember when the personal computer came along. I'm just old enough to remember PCs coming into my dad's office. And before then, they all had typewriters and various things that had to be done, and they used acetate sheets to write on overhead projectors. And all of a sudden, the computer came along, and you had a word processor, so you could change your text, you could change the font and do stuff like that. And for a few years, the PC was the most exciting thing in the office. And now it's just something we have. You don't really notice PCs and computers in offices and things like that anymore because you expect them. And I think AI is going to be very much like that as you go into jobs. You're going to be interacting with AI without realizing it. So one of the people we used in the course, Liz, she's a trained solicitor. and she talks about how AI is helping the legal industry. And one of the big things it's very good at is doing research. Previously, either solicitors or what were called legal secretaries had to do research by going through previous cases and legal documents to find information relevant to the current cases. AI can do that for you now. It can pull huge amounts of information, structure it, and actually produce a briefing document that the solicitor can use. Obviously, they need to go away and check it because AI does make mistakes. Um, so the role you'll be having if you're a professional is you will be interacting with an AI who will be doing some of the boring jobs for you. So it will be doing things like researching. It might be composing emails on your behalf. It might be filtering what's coming in to prioritize the vast number of messages we all get. It will be alerting to you to what's going on, things like that. It'll be reading your news feeds and giving you the most relevant information and hiding the stuff that you don't need for your job. So we're all going to be using it, which is why having some level of AI literacy, understanding what this technology is good for, what it's not good for, and how it works is good for all of us, whether you go into AI, because there's lots of jobs in AI. If you want to go and work for an AI company or a tech company that is developing artificial intelligences, there are no end of jobs available for you. But for most of us, no matter what we're doing, we will be interacting with AI in some way or another, and we do need to know what's going on.
Just conscious of the time
Yeah, no
now, Mike,
problem.
we've only got about sort of 10 minutes left.
Sure.
So just as we draw it to a close, and apologies if we haven't got around to your questions, but just to kind of draw it to a close, what are the next steps or what are the progression routes that our learners have at their disposal once they've done the Getting Started with Generative AI course?
Okay. Well, you've already mentioned, I mean, I suppose I have to plug our employers. The Open University from next year will be offering a complete degree in artificial intelligence at undergraduate level, which is 3 years. And this is for people who want to know how AI itself works. So, starting from someone who may never have programmed a computer in their lives. It's a 3 year full-time program, 6 years if you do it part-time. You will learn to program. You'll use Python. You will start to interact with databases, and as you progress, you'll work through different programming styles. You will start understanding some of the big issues around AI, how it works, some of the history. It will go into the ethics of AI, which is a huge area we haven't had time to talk about today. We touch on it in the course, and you will learn about some of the applications for AI in other technology fields. So that's one way if you wanted to do a BSc in AI. There are most colleges around the country now will have offerings in technology, all of which are going to have some aspect of AI in it. The education area has realized this topic's not going away. We need to let everyone know about it. So if you want to go into AI through a college, by all means do that way. You can always move on to a degree. The other thing that may be worth considering are apprenticeships. Many companies, technology companies, engineering companies, and other businesses are looking for apprenticeships. So if you have an interest in AI and you want to do an apprenticeship, look around in your area, look through careers offices and things like that to see if there's any companies in your area where you could actually work and study and develop the skills in artificial intelligence. That's open to you. And if none of that appeals to you, but you want to know more about AI, there is a huge amount of stuff online. Get used to hitting the internet search engine. You want to know how to program, get programming, but you don't have time, the money, or whatever to do it formally. There are lots of ways to get interacting with AI, developing AI tools, and things like that. Have a lot of fun. Some of these courses are amazing. And obviously, if AI is just something that might affect one of your interests, so you're a photographer like I am, play with the packages, play with the software, get used to it. Just use it, and then actually that's something you can actually add to your CV, your resume. When you go on to employment or further training, you can actually sort of say, I use I don't Adobe Photoshop, let's just say, and I'm skilled in these AI packages, these processes, and you can add it to your portfolio. Same with music and even writing and things like that. In the course, we talked to Stephanie, who's an author who's becoming established now, and she talks about how she used AI to develop a short story and used it as a friend, as a critic, and in other roles, including developing the cover art and things like that. So think how AI can affect your life. And if you want to go the formal training route, look at universities. Open University is always here. Look at local colleges. If you want to train yourselves, there's loads of stuff online. A simple internet search will find you things like if you want to say how to program a neural net, have fun. You'll require a little bit of programming skill beforehand, but you can do it. You can download large language models onto your computer. They run incredibly slowly, I'll warn you now, but you can actually play with your own large language model on your personal computer rather than use ChatGPT. There's a million and one things to do. Have fun. That's the thing. Have fun. Always have fun.
I think that's a good takeaway. So I'm just very conscious of the time. So I think kind of
Sure.
the natural steps for following that discussion would be to encourage you, if you haven't already, try the Getting Started with AI course. We've put that into the chat there so you can easily find it. Hone your CV by taking advantage of a partnership we've got with Get My First Digital Job. They're a career coaching organization, and all Clickstart learners have exclusive access to their one-to-one career coach, CV writing, job interview preparation. So I've put the links in the chat there. So please do take a look. I'll include the links on our webinar page on the Clickstart course platform as well, and start to demonstrate your passion and interest through building a portfolio. Like Mike said, on the course, I think it's in week 6, isn't it, Mike, that you get to do the practical assignment.
Yes.
So that can kind of give you something you can show either potential employers or colleges if you wanted to go on to more formal, or you can
Yeah.
also seek kind of work experience. And I'll just put the link in the chat there now, because we do have a partnership with the OU to help you sort of find opportunities for virtual work experience. So do take a look at that. So just finally from me is just to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope you found this session useful. We'll hope to see you at our next event. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.